Today I'm going to be speaking with Jake Tapper, CNN anchor, chief Washington correspondent, co-author of the book Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Really appreciate your time. More so as a disclaimer to my audience before we start. Listen, I know that there are people that are angry with Jake about the book for different reasons. I know some of the questions my audience wants me to ask. And, this is not going to be me yelling or scolding Jake the way Megyn Kelly did. We're going to have a conversation here. And I understand some of the concerns that my audience has raised, and we're sort of going to talk about them. And so to start, I'm almost completely through the book, Jake, and I've reviewed a lot of the interviews you've done. I think the primary question that has remained unanswered to many in my audience is, given the obviously newsworthy and even decision-making worthy nature of much of what's in the book, why did none of this come out from you as you vetted and conducted the research and interviews at a time when maybe it would have been actionable for voters?
Well, it's a great question. And the simple answer is that almost Alex Thompson, my co-author, and I, almost all of the interviews we did for the book were after the election. There was this feeling among Democrats that any acknowledgement, any disclosure of what was going on behind the scenes before the election would only help Donald Trump. And I wish I had known a lot of this, if not all of this, as it was happening. Of course. I mean, Alex Thompson and I are, in addition to collaborators in this book, we're fiercely competitive journalists with each other and with others. And I mean, I would have loved to have broken any of these stories when they happened. But the fear of God had been put into so many Democrats that anything to disclose what was really going on with President Biden would help Donald Trump, and therefore there was this omerta, this silence about what was going on until after the election. And then after the election, we made a list, Alex and I, when we started writing this book, and like literally after the election is when the day before the election, I said to him, you and I should work on something. And the day after the election, he and I started putting together the proposal and everything. We made a list of everybody we wanted to talk to. And, and we found it much easier to get through to those people with the election over. And there was no longer the threat of Donald Trump. It was the reality of Donald Trump. And so people were a lot more willing to talk.
So the simple explanation from a timing standpoint seems to be, you were only told these things after the election was over, and therefore you couldn't possibly have reported on them before you knew them.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, yeah, entirely. I did not know, like, for instance, there's the story that was excerpted in the New Yorker that got a lot of attention about President Biden not recognizing George Clooney. I didn't know that story until after the election. I mean, it was shocking to me. I would have loved to have broken that story in June 2024, or any of the stories that we have in the book. But look, even today, people are very reluctant to talk about this stuff because it's seen as disloyal still among Democrats to say anything about Joe Biden, instead of focusing one's attention on Donald Trump. And there are obvious sensitivities about talking about somebody's health, whoever it is. There's sensitivities about talking about your grandma's health, not you, but somebody's grandmother's health. I mean, like, these are the most sensitive things that there are in the world to talk about: mortality, infirmament, etc. So that's the simple answer. Almost every single interview we did that's in the book was after the election. And Alex and I were surprised at how many, like, when we pitched the book, but we didn't know how much we were going to get until the interviews started. And we were surprised at how much we learned. We thought we knew a little, maybe, but we had no idea, but not in a confirmable way, except for the stuff that had been reported. but then we were just flabbergasted. So I mean, I think that that's just the honest answer. And I know this has been a criticism for a long time of anybody who is a daily journalist, but also that writes books. Bob Woodward, Maggie Haberman,
That was
whoever.
exactly the example I was thinking of, the Woodward. Yeah.
Well, the Woodward one, I understand. I mean, like I'm not here to jump on Bob Woodward, but Donald Trump told him in like January 2020 that they believed that COVID was airborne. Um, Now, I don't know what I assume that Donald Trump was talking to Woodward only for that book or whatever. I mean, I don't know the deal. I don't know the situation. But yeah, look, I mean, I get that criticism. But I was stunned on on June 27th, the night of the debate, June 27th, 2024. You know, I, like you, like everybody, had seen him aging through the years, and I'd seen the gaffes and the missteps and the trips and all that. But I, like everybody else, was just as stunned to see how addled he was, President Biden, on the debate stage. That was a surprise to so many people. And the reason why it was a surprise is because they had done a pretty good job of hiding, not that he was getting old and not that that there were moments where people didn't know what was going on, but the degree to which he was had deteriorated, I think, was kept fairly successfully from people. Like people knew he was aging, and that was a concern among voters, and it was something that people talked about, especially conservatives. But I don't think anybody had any idea how bad it could be until that night, at least publicly.
I want to go back to June 27th. So I do an opinion show up until June 27th. My view, which I was very clear about with my audience, was I don't think Biden should have ever run for reelection. Given where we are, I think right now the calculation is if he gets out, that does more damage than whatever benefit there is to replacing him. That was my opinion up until 7 p.m. on June 27th, right? Or whatever time the debate was. Actually, the debate
Nine,
was late, which is another
much
factor. You
late,
write, yeah, you
much,
write about that
much
in the book.
late.
That's right.
9 p.m.'s late for me.
Right.
I
No, I
don't know
know.
what
Me
it's like for
too.
an 81-year-old.
Me
Yeah.
too. So after that debate, the next
Hmm.
morning, even that night, I said to my audience, listen, whatever you as a follower of a political show believes about Joe Biden right now, my instinct is that what happened tonight, last night, is going to lead to an amount of pressure where he's going to have to get out. And given that, I think there needs to be the most cohesive possible plan if you're a Democrat who wants to see Donald Trump defeated to replace him in a way that will bring people in rather than push people away. And my
Yeah.
audience was split. There were people who said, it wasn't that bad last night. Here are the talking points. There was
Yeah.
this sort of painful Newsom appearance, Gavin Newsom, in the days that
Yeah.
followed, where it was like, yikes, I don't know that this is going to convince anybody, Gavin. I'm not really sure about this.
Seriously.
And eventually the pressure did become too great. What
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you as someone who talked after the fact with people about that night, was that night the clear signal to everybody or mostly everybody that it was to me, but they couldn't say it yet? Or were there genuinely people who thought, that wasn't really that bad?
I mean, it's a great question. It was a multitude of takes. I think there were people who, like, for instance, let's say Biden's top aide, Mike Donilon, who would say and argue Joe Biden on his worst day is better than Donald Trump on his best. It doesn't matter X, Y, Z, that, and that's just it. And it's a choice. And that's one of the reasons why there was an early debate because the White House had bad polling and they were eager to make it not a referendum on Biden, but a choice between Biden and Trump. And Joe Biden and Mike Donilon and others were convinced, get the choice out there, and Biden will win that. Mike Donilon would say he won before with people thinking he was too old. He's going to do it again. So there's that group.
Yep.
And I think there's a little, um, there's for some of those people in that group, there is a little delusion about how bad it was because it was really bad. And if you go back and watch it, it was really, really bad. And it was not, this isn't, for a lot of people. I mean, this is one of the issues that people in that group have, which is this isn't about, um, this is about like 1 million voters in 7 states, right? I mean, this is about people who voted Obama, Trump, Biden. I mean, this is about people who split their ticket
Right.
and change vote and like are not. I don't know if it's high information voters is the right term, but people who are not allegiant to a party, and they felt a lot of those voters felt, and a lot of the spin that was coming from the Biden campaign about a focus group that they talked about a lot. They wouldn't mention that the focus group was almost entirely of voters that had voted against Trump and for Biden before, who were still split because that Biden was so bad. So that's one. There were people that were confused. What was that? That was horrible. Oh, they're saying it was a bad night. Okay, well let's give them an opportunity to. I'm talking about Democratic officials now.
Yeah.
Let's give them an opportunity to show that was just an aberration. And he didn't, and because honestly, he couldn't. That's the bottom line. It's like he didn't have a press conference for I think another week, and it was after NATO,
And the
and
press conference was not good.
no, it wasn't as bad as the debate, but it was not good. He referred to Vice President. I think he confused Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and first of all, the NATO stuff. He's not on issues that he cares about, he's better than on issues he doesn't. And he really, really cares about NATO. He really, really cares about Ukraine. Those issues, he can talk about that better than he can talk about the economy or abortion rights or whatever. And then I think there were people who were in a group who were like, I knew this was going to happen. I mean, I had seen this behind the scenes, and this is horrible, and I suspected it was this bad. And we have some of them on the record in the book, like David Axelrod, who had been, talking about this publicly, Dean Phillips, who'd run against him, and others. And then there were people who are not Democrats, but also part of the story, like Robert Hur, the special counsel, who had seen a Biden this bad behind the scenes in October 2023 when he did that interview for the special counsel report. Annie Linsky and Siobhan Hughes from the Wall Street Journal, who had been reporting on this and trying to break stories about what Biden was like behind the scenes. People who had suspected that this was how bad it could be. And the truth of the matter is, on Earth 2, that debate goes fine, not great, but fine. And then and then it's not till the second debate in like October where he has that debate. You know what I mean? Like this was going to happen sooner or later. And the question is, was it going to happen in June or was it going to happen, at a town hall in September or whatever? But I mean, what our reporting shows is not that Joe Biden is unable to speak, unable to give a speech, unable to have a nice exchange with somebody, is that he has these moments like he had at the debate where he really can't form a complete sentence or come together with a coherent thought. And it's not like with anybody, you look like you're a young person. So maybe we're talking about your grandparents, but like, and I hope your grandparents are alive and well and thriving. But like,
Sadly, Baruch Hashem, they are no longer with us.
okay, well, I'm sorry. Neither are mine, and so my parents are now in their 80s, and like
Yeah.
this happens, and people have good days and bad days, and it doesn't just like go like this. It's just it's a chart where good days, bad days, and et cetera, and that's like Joe Biden, and so I mean I think that's the situation now. The other I'm sorry to babble, but like the other thing that you bring up is the idea of like a contest, and that's what people like Pelosi, Obama, and others wanted.
Yeah.
They wanted some exercise of democracy and voting, whether it was, even if it was delegates voting with some sort of contested primary or like a contested convention rather, or a truncated primary system or whatever. But, primaries they're not official like United States government. The parties can make it up. They can do whatever they want. They could
Yeah.
say, okay, we have a new nominee. Now we're going to have a Northeast, we're going to have the New England primary on this day and the Southern states on this day. They could have done whatever, but Joe Biden spent more than 3 weeks before he dropped out, and there went that idea.
I want to talk a little bit about sort of a compare and contrast with some of the reporting on Trump. And I'm glad for you to take this on as your personal reporting,
Hmm.
CNN, or more broadly as legacy and corporate media.
Sure, sure.
I'm seeing significant hesitation to report not on the recklessness of Trump's policies, which I've heard you say in interviews. No, we're reporting on the recklessness of Trump's policies, but things like focus on Trump being unresponsive to questions as if he doesn't understand them. Last week, he was asked about Alligator Alcatraz. How long will inmates stay here? And the question was repeated twice. And Trump goes, I love spending time in Florida. I'm going to be here a lot. And it didn't seem to be an issue of his hearing. It seemed to be an issue of comprehension. Yesterday, he's now covering hand bruises with very obvious makeup, and his ankles look very swollen. I mean, they
Yep.
genuinely look significantly swollen. Mixing up Pelosi and Nikki Haley,
Yep.
appearing disoriented. Why do you think Trump's president now, and there's almost more discussion of Biden's health, who is no longer president? What do you think is going on?
Well, there's a lot of things that you just mentioned in there, and they're all different.
Yep.
I I can't get into Donald Trump's brain. I don't know exactly what was going on with the Alligator Alley question. From what I saw, it looked like he was just dodging the question,
Hmm.
like pretending like to answer a different question, which he
Really?
and that's what it looked like to me. Which make it doesn't make it any better, but it doesn't
Okay.
make it addlement. It makes it avoiding the question.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know what it was in terms of the potential bruises on his hand or whatever the theories are, and his ankles. I saw the photos of that. Um, Look, Donald Trump has never been transparent about his health the way that the American people deserve. He was more transparent this last health report than he was in previous ones, and especially when he was running for re-election in 2024. But he doesn't disclose information, and that's one of the points at the end of the book. I know you haven't gotten there yet, but at the end of the book, we talk about what needs to happen, and we talk to a doctor who's a consultant for the White House medical team, and he says that the health report, which is not law, it's just tradition, that the White House physician needs to give that to Congress under threat of perjury. I mean, that the American people are owed that. And I think that's one of the things that I hope the Biden lesson. And look, you can't apply it to Trump because you'll never get Congress to go along with it. But why not pass a law requiring some sort of health disclosure for future presidents? So, so that it takes the Trump and the Biden out of it and just, I mean, it might be challenged as unconstitutional because of the legislative branch versus the executive or whatever, but there needs to be some disclosure.
No, I
As
would love
for,
to see that too. But I mean, I think you're getting to this. But even if we think about like today, if
yeah,
you today wanted to do a story where you go, listen, I'm not a doctor, but here's what we see now for 2 months on Trump's hands. It's very obviously covered with makeup.
but what is
Here's
it?
a the oh well, I mean it seems as though it's an I where he's getting an IV for something, which of course hasn't been disclosed, and his hands are bruised, and he's covering it up with makeup because it started to get attention that his hands are bruised. I mean that's the most likely explanation, I think. But I
Yeah.
guess what I'm wondering is if you wanted to do that story today on CNN and go, there's a history of lack of transparency. When he was in the hospital with COVID and doctors were asked, is he getting
Yeah.
did he get oxygen? They said he's not on oxygen today, right?
There's
There's
even,
this
but there's even more than that. There's an entire trip to Walter Reed that he went on in
right.
2023 that they didn't disclose what it was. I mean,
Could
I'm
you,
sorry,
but my question is,
2023,
could you do that
2019,
story
2019.
today on CNN if you wanted, or would there be problems at some level of the company?
I don't think there would be problems. It's just a question of what are the facts and what do we know? And, um, White House, I mean, the same problem that I faced covering Biden, while Biden was president, I face until the election at least, I face covering Trump, which is like
Mm.
people are not sharing information. I think that it's worth asking questions about these things. I'm not reluctant to cover them. I do think that a lot of times people conflate Biden's issues with Trump's issues. And I think a lot of Trump's issues, and this is not to excuse them, but this is just talking to doctors and whatever, is have more to do with his personality.
Mm.
And I mean that in the clinical term of personality. I don't mean like, oh, he seems nice enough or whatever. Like, I mean, people talk about when people talk about what's wrong in their view with President Trump, they're talking about him being narcissistic. They're talking about him being lacking empathy and things like that are not about cognitive issues. So it's a different wing of the hospital, which is not to say that it shouldn't be covered or it shouldn't be discussed. And in fact, we have discussed it. We discussed it a lot during the first term. But I mean, I think that, and the other part of that is he won with people knowing that that is his personality for better or for worse. It's not as if I'm not talking about the bruises now or the ankles or whatever. That's a
Yeah,
separate issue. But about like the word choice and sometimes when he seems unsympathetic or sometimes, I mean, I think it was George Conway who wrote, former husband of Kellyanne Conway, who wrote an entire article for The Atlantic. I'd have to go back and check, but
I
something
think
along
you're
the
right.
lines. He was basically saying that he thinks that Donald Trump has like malignant personality disorder or something like that.
Yeah.
Excuse the paraphrase, but something like that. And he it's a whole thing about the going through diagnostic definitions and such. And that's that's fair game. But I think that's where Trump's issues lie more, not on the confusing Nikki Haley, Nancy Pelosi. That's aging or whatever. But I'm not excusing it. Also, we covered it.
Yeah.
We covered it.
Last thing I want to ask you about. We saw the successful lawsuit against George Stephanopoulos. We
Mhm.
saw 60 Minutes choose to settle rather than fight in court what seemed like a pretty good case that they didn't really do anything wrong
Well, it
in
wasn't
terms of
60 Minutes that settled. It was
it was Paramount,
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 which owns CBS News, which
which
owns
owns 60
60
Minutes.
Minutes.
Yeah,
60 Minutes would not have the team at 60
that's
Minutes
fair.
would never have done that. And in fact, the president of CBS News and the executive producer of 60 Minutes both left because, at least partly because of that
That's a
lawsuit.
that's a good clarification. It seems as though there is starting to be some self-censorship as a result of those two successes. And I've recently had meetings with some of these sort of conglomerates about series ideas that I have that wouldn't even be political. And they've basically said to me, just because of your show, we're kind of scared right now of doing anything that could even be remotely seen as political when we are really in a different kind of business, to not expose who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Are you seeing some of that self-censorship because of the effect of those lawsuits? And well, I'll just leave it at that. Are you seeing any of that self-censorship? Is it a reasonable concern that it would be going on now?
I'm not seeing it at CNN, but I think it is a reasonable concern, and I think it predates the Disney settlement and the Paramount settlement, which and of those, I don't think either of them should have settled. But of the two, the Paramount one was egregious. I mean, like all sorts of legal experts said that they thought that Donald Trump had no case,
Yeah,
and in fact, we've pointed out on my show several times that the edits that he was complaining about that had been done to the 60 Minutes interview, which he depicts falsely every time he describes it. I mean, just for your folks who probably know this already, but she gave a very long answer in Kamala Harris when asked about Gaza and Netanyahu to Bill Whitaker, the 60 Minutes reporter. And when they ran an excerpt of it on Face the Nation and on Sunday, uh, they used one little clip of it, and then when they ran the 60 Minutes interview, Monday or Tuesday or whenever they ran that special, they used a different excerpt of the same very long, very word salady kind of answer. Compared to what Fox News did, um, when uh, one of their anchors, Rachel Campos Duffy, asked Donald Trump about the Epstein files.
yeah.
And they ran on that was like, yes, I would release them. But then his longer answer, which ran on the podcast version of the interview, he backs off that and says, well, maybe I wouldn't release it because there's a lot of fake stuff in there, a lot of people who, didn't do anything, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't run that whole answer. That is now different rules. There are different rules because CBS is public network, public airwaves. So the FCC regulates them. They don't regulate cable like Fox News. But if you're looking for a more egregious example of editing to make somebody look one way or the other, the Fox interview is a much more blatant example. So anyway, I'm blabbing again, but
All true
um,
though.
I haven't seen it, but I do think that we are in an era now of more litigiousness. But this started during the first Trump term, or when he started suing companies, and a lot of it was thrown out. But there have been just a lot of lawsuits, and a lot of judge shopping, people filing their lawsuits in Florida, where there are friendlier judges to the idea of media bias, et cetera. And so I have seen that. I haven't seen any like result of it. Nobody said don't do this or don't cover that. But I mean, I do think that that is certainly the background of the media in 2025. But I mean, I cover Jeffrey Epstein every day. And because these files are a pretty big, important story, and they're obviously causing a lot of consternation for the president among his base. And also, I was stunned when they basically said nothing to see here when the Justice Department put out that memo. But if I was that worried, then I wouldn't be touching that.
We've been speaking with Jake Tapper. The book is Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, and thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.